Hello, this is Dr. Rick Hofer, the instructor for this course on administrative skills. We're going to cover material relating to leaders' personal communication skills right now, and so let's get going. It's important. So why should we look at personal communication, and really what is it? Communication at its core is sending and receiving messages. Messages of transformation, direction, praise, correction, affirmation, hope, affection, or belonging. These are some of the kinds of messages you can send. You can also send messages that are negative. You want to be sure that you're picking the kind of message that you actually want to send. You can demonstrate disdain or disapproval or all sorts of negative things. So it's important that you look at yourself and your own personal communication style and techniques. Leaders must know the techniques of effective communication to make connections with others within and outside their organization. Personal communication also provides a means of accomplishing organizational goals through the work of those other people. As a leader, you can't do everything yourself, so you have to communicate personally with people who will then pass along your message. Therefore, it's very important that you are able to communicate what you want to communicate, because down the line it's going to get garbled. So the clearer you can be, the better it's going to be for the people below you in the hierarchy. We have to realize that the most well-written and delivered speech, even if it is a wonderful application of communication theory, will fall flat if a personal communication is not made with the intended audience. Leadership has a lot to do with making connections, and you make connections through communication. If you're not able to create those connections, then your communications are not going to work well. So it's important and it's worth time to get good at. I'm going to talk about several skills that are vital for leadership personal communication. The first one is the ability to create a shared identity. Then we have active listening. Following that, we have managing the emotional self. Storytelling is a skill that's very important as well, and you must become very skilled at written communication. Let's take a look at these one by one. Create a shared identity. Leaders take action to make people feel part of something that they are in and others are out. This is that shared identity. You might see a leader connect with people about where they come from, what their hobbies are, what they like to do in their spare time, who they know, things like that. Anything you can do to reach out and make a connection around a shared identity will be helpful as you communicate. People naturally listen better and like better people who are like themselves. Some of the ways that you create a shared identity include to clarify group norms. This means that you communicate clearly that people like us do things like this. People like us in this organization go out of our way to actually help clients. People like us take care of each other within the organization. We leave no person behind, things like that. You have to identify the elements of the organization and your identity. What's important to us? How do we see each other? It's important to us that we all show up on time. It's important to us that we are able to use our skills in an effective way. These are things that are the elements of our organization. When you're able to identify the elements of the organization and connect that to identity, then people will correct themselves and they will feel less bad about correcting others in order to keep them in line with these identity elements. You also have to structure the organization to promote the reality of group identity. Here's the way that we look. We wear certain clothing. We're dressed professionally. We're dressed casually. We wear hoodies. We wear ties. Here's how we look. Here's what we wear. Here's where we hang out. And things like this. This is the structuring the organization. Managers do not identify with their workers, and leaders who are not seen as being part of the organization face significant challenges in their work and trying to lead any group of people. Think about it for yourself. If everyone in the group is wearing casual clothes and someone comes in wearing a suit, that kind of sets them apart. You may find it harder to trust them. You may find that you don't want to do what they're telling you to do because obviously they're a suit and you're a hoodie wearer. Things like that. Leaders also have to engage in active listening. When you're active listening, you listen for meaning, not just the words. And you're also not listening to be able to put in your own thoughts. You're actually letting the other person come up and conclude with their own ideas. Active listening responds to emotions and notes nonverbal signals. The result of all of this is that you get a better understanding and you get better results. Now, active listening won't solve all the problems in the workplace, but it will help with most. As social workers, we're trained to be good listeners. This needs to be switched from the clinical side to the administrative side of the workforce within social work as well. Managing the emotional self becomes vital. One thing that happens in any job, but particularly with administrative jobs, is that there's a lot of stress. What you need to do is avoid amygdala hijacking. Now, what is amygdala hijacking and why should you avoid it? There's a part of your brain called the amygdala, and it is part of the reptilian brain. It's the oldest part of your brain in terms of evolution. It's sometimes called the reptilian brain. This is the part of your brain that is alert for danger. The other part of your brain that you use to think with is your prefrontal cortex. And once your reptilian brain takes over, it will shut down your prefrontal cortex. Think about what happens if you get scared. You're ready to run. This is your fight or flight stance. The third category is also freeze. So you have fright, and that leads to freeze, flight, or fight. None of those involves thinking. So you have to do something about this. And so what do? You slow down. You take note of your emotional state. You're able to say, I'm upset, I'm scared, I'm angry. And then you slow down and you are able to take care of that situation by knowing how you're feeling. So then you can think about how you want the situation to end and how to get there. If you're about to blow up at an employee, you probably don't want that to be the end of the situation. How would you like it to end? Probably you would like the situation to end with a mutual agreement over what needs to be done, how things can be improved, things like that. So how are you going to get there? At this point, you need to make sure that you do more active listening. You can potentially use humor to diffuse the situation as long as it's self-deprecating humor. That is, you poke fun at yourself, not at other people. Now, not only do you need to do this for yourself, but sometimes you need to do it for your entire group or your team. You use these same techniques. This is an important part of your job as a manager, to take care of yourself and also to be able to take care of your team so that everyone can accomplish the job that you're there to do. Another aspect of personal communication is being able to tell stories. People remember stories better than unadorned facts. So you want to try to weave in stories so that people can remember what you tell them. I don't mean to suggest that everything you say start with "once upon a time," but stories can be very short little segments about almost anything. You have to imagine the information you want to impart as an episode in your own organization's life. Good stories always have the following attributes. There's a protagonist. That is, more or less, who's the hero of the story. Usually it's better if you're not the hero, but the person like the worker is the hero. There's a challenge that they face. Things are going along fine, and then something happens that's a challenge. The next part of the story is a resolution. Somehow things get fixed and end up at least as good as when they started, and hopefully they're better. This all leads to the moral of the story. If you have all four of these elements, it's going to make your communication more interesting and more memorable. Let's talk some more about stories. There are several different kinds of stories. One of them is the who I am story. As a leader, you need to get across the kind of person you are and what your values are. When you open yourself up a bit to allow those around you to see who you are, they become more trusting of you, and they will be more likely to do as you ask. This type of story is important in job interviews, for example. Interviewers might ask you to describe a time when you overcame an obstacle or approached a new situation. Obviously, this is going to be important. You're looking for a job. Tell me about yourself. You've already done storytelling in this class, when you wrote up your discussion post about a values conflict that you had or an ethical dilemma. That was a story, and we learned quite a bit about you and the way that you operate. So that's a who I am story. Political candidates, for example, have a well-rehearsed story of who I am, so they can connect with the electorate, particularly as they start wooing new sets of voters. A second kind of story is the why I am here. This is somewhat related to the first type about who I am. When you're a leader, people working with you and for you want to know not only who you are, but why you are in your current position. I was hired at the University of Texas at Arlington because I was an expert in a certain field. The person who was competing for the job against me also was an expert in that field. But let me tell you how I got the job instead of the other person. That's a kind of why I am here story, and it would tell you quite a bit about me. As it turns out, the reason I was chosen over the other person is because I told a better story in my job talk. When you've chosen to be part of an organization, in fact, if you're the leader within it, people want to have insight into what you want to accomplish. That's why I'm here. I'm here in order to help improve the world through my role as a social work educator. A third kind of story is teaching stories. We're very familiar with this. For millennia, the parables of Jesus, such as the Good Samaritan, or the parables of Aesop, with the story of the boy who cried wolf, have become shorthand ways of communicating the right way or the wrong way to live. If you can encapsulate the best practices for your organization in a teaching story, you can be sure that the message will get through, it will be remembered, and people will act on it. What happened to the person who took money? Even though they were many years in the organization, they were well respected, but they got caught taking just $5 out of the till that was supposed to be for clients. This person was fired and will never get another job in the city. That's a kind of a teaching story about how we're going to act to people who go against client interest. A fourth kind of story is a communicating a vision story. There are some perfect examples of this with the Civil Rights Movement. Martin Luther King was able to communicate very well in speeches such as the I Have a Dream that is so inspiring. John Kennedy was able to create a vision of sending a man to the moon and returning him safely. Things like this communicate a sense of where we're going and why it's important. If you can get people to understand what your vision is, if you can get people to agree with your vision, then you will attract the right people, and the people who don't want to be a part of that vision are not going to come. And that's good. Sometimes you have to kick out the people that you don't need so that you can attract the people you do need. When you and your organization can develop a story of where you want to go, this inspiration will help keep you going even through massive difficulties. All big visions encounter massive difficulties. The question is, how are you going to persevere? How are you going to get people to keep slogging away on a daily basis so that you can reach this vision if they don't really tune into it? The next major skill is written communication. Most of these other things have been talked about in terms of oral communication. But if you're not a good written communicator, you're going to have problems. Much more of your communication will take place outside of the narrow group of people that you can talk to personally every day. So you have to be able to write convincingly just as much as you speak convincingly. The stories that you have written down can be every bit as effective as the stories that are communicated orally. To get good at writing, you must practice, get feedback, and work to improve. There's a little discussion post that you have to do every week. You might think, oh, what busy work. But actually, there's much more to it than that. It's practicing written communication. You have a question that you're trying to answer in a short amount of space with not very many words. This is great practice, and you should take these very seriously. What are the core elements of personal communication for leaders? Create a shared identity so that people know that they're part of this organization or they're not. You want to listen actively. You want to manage emotions, not just your own, but the emotions of the people around you. Tell stories. There are many different kinds of stories, and you need to get good at all of them. Finally, learn to write well. If you do all these 5 things, you can become a great personal communicator, and your effectiveness as a leader will skyrocket.